Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and over the past couple of weeks I haven't had a news update because we had WWDC 2022 with the keynotes, updates, and more, and this week we're expecting the follow-up to many of those updates, along with iPhone 14 news and much more. This is your news update for the week of June 20th, 2022. And a big controversy from iPadOS 16 and the release of those updates is the decision for only M1 iPads to include the new Stage Manager feature. So on the M1 iPad Pro, we can use Stage Manager, which allows us to have 4 different apps open at once or 8 apps when connected to an external display. In a statement that was shared from Craig Federighi, he's the head of Apple software, to Rene Ritchie, he said, "Stage Manager requires large internal memory, incredibly fast storage, and flexible external display I/O. All of which are delivered by the iPads with the M1 chip. It's only the M1 iPads that combine the high DRAM capacity with very high capacity, high performance NAND that allows our virtual swap to be super fast, which enables this feature." Now, quite a few people were upset about this, especially if you have a 2020 iPad Pro, you can't use this feature. However, it looks like they were able to try it internally with some new modes that were found in the code, but if it doesn't perform well, Apple doesn't typically use that in their products. So they may have tested it and decided that it just wasn't fast enough to work on previous devices, meaning that we have 4 different apps open here, we can have 4 additional apps open on an external display, and maybe it just can't handle it because it's using that internal swap memory, virtual swap update that they have with iPadOS 16. I'm curious to hear what you think about this because this is something that's fairly controversial and even includes the iPad Air, the latest generation, if you only have the base model like I have here. This will not have Stage Manager because of that. So that's a bit of a disappointment, seeing how we won't have it with the latest iPad Air if it's the base model. But all of the M1s will, and of course future versions as well. Let me know what you think about this in the comments below. To go along with iPad, Apple is hosting professional learning virtual conferences. You can register for free and join in and learn about topics such as make musical masterpieces, create audio and video scores, dive deep into learning with AR, and there's more and more as you scroll down to learn to code with Swift. So a bunch of different topics if you want to learn about those, and you can see the times here starting tomorrow on Tuesday, June 21st, 2022, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. CDT time. So you can register, join those, and learn more about those topics online. Recently, it was decided in the EU that all devices will have to switch to a common adapter such as USB-C. Now this is great in some ways and bad in others in that you can't innovate past USB-C very easily now if it's a law, but it looks like the U.S. may be trying to follow suit. So U.S. Senators Ed Markey, Elizabeth Warren, and Bernie Sanders have drafted a letter to the Secretary of Commerce pushing for the U.S. to follow what the EU has done to reduce e-waste and environmental damage. So this is another one of those controversial topics where it would be nice to have the same adapter across iPhone, iPad, and Mac, but also it doesn't leave room for innovation in the future since it would be very hard to move away from that as technology progresses. So I'm curious to know what you think about that in the comments below, as I would love to have the same adapter, but in the future we could switch to something smaller, something wireless, or something completely different. Let me know what you think about that in the comments below. One of the great features of iOS 16 is the ability to edit a message after you've sent it for up to 15 minutes. Press and hold on it, then you can edit or even undo send, and some of this has sparked a little bit of concern for different advocacy groups. So you can change this after the fact to correct your spelling and then correct it like that. But after you maybe delete a message, some advocacy groups that are concerned about abuse may want you to have a record of that so you could share that if you needed some help. They've suggested some changes and hopefully Apple implements some of them, meaning that you would maybe have a log of the things you've sent so that you can get them later, or things that have been edited to help those people that may need a little extra help due to an abusive situation. So that's something that may be considered very soon. And again, I'd love to hear your comments about that below, as this is something I think is maybe overlooked by quite a few people, but could be very important for some. Tomorrow, June 21st, is the International Day of Yoga, and Apple has a new reward badge for anyone that completes a 20-minute yoga session. You'll have new workouts for yoga and more, and you'll have some different badges. So you can see the badge here, and if you complete that, you'll get your activity badge on your watch if you're curious about that or interested in it. So just wanted to make you aware of it. Last week, the updated MacBook Pro went on sale with the new M2 chipset, and it's already delayed quite a bit. Now we're waiting for the MacBook Air, and personally, I wouldn't buy this new MacBook Pro 13-inch with the M2 unless I really liked the Touch Bar. If we go into order now, it can be delayed as far as August. So if we just go down, maybe select this configuration here, wait for it to load, and if we select maybe the high-end configuration with 2 terabytes of storage, you'll see it could be pushed out as far as August 4th or August 11th. It won't be available for local pickup either very easily. So this is something I'm not too fond of Apple doing, is keeping this around, but maybe they had a bunch of chassis for the M1 and just wanted to move it over to the M2. I think you should wait for the MacBook Air that actually has the all-new design, doesn't have the touch bar. I've never been a big fan of it, but if you are, of course, it's still available. And then, of course, has much nicer design and other things with that. So I love the new MacBook Air. This MacBook Pro has served me well. It's very fast, but with an M2 in it would be even better. But the fan does not seem to offer a whole lot of benefit for those who've seen the difference between this and the Air. So I would personally wait for the Air, but if you really want one, you're going to have to wait a little while now. Now, along with that MacBook, Apple also released a 35-watt dual USB-C port power adapter. This is available now, and this style here that you see is only available in the United States. However, the one below it looks very similar to what we have now, where you can change out the end and swap it to maybe something in India or China or the UK, where you have different plugs than we have here in the US. So that's available now. And then also they pushed out, or Apple pushed out, a support document explaining how it would provide power split between devices if you plug in 2 separate devices. So if you connect a Mac notebook or an iPhone and an Apple Watch or AirPods, the Mac notebook or iPhone receives up to 27.5 watts, and the Apple Watch or iPhone or AirPods receive up to 7.5 watts. So they split it that way. However, if you were to plug in 2 iPhones or an iPhone and an iPad, it just splits it evenly. So only the Mac notebook benefits from the higher power, but you can opt for a more powerful adapter specifically for the MacBook if you want to. Now, over the past few weeks, many expected iOS 15.5.1 since Apple stopped signing iOS 15.4.1. Now at this point, it looks like Apple's just going to wait till iOS 15.6. And that means this week we should have an iOS 15.6 Beta 4 or release candidate, probably tomorrow or Wednesday, followed by iOS 16 Beta 2 probably on Wednesday or Thursday, depending on when the other beta comes out. It's very rare for Apple to release them on the same day. Then we would have iOS 15.6 probably released next week at some point, if that's what Apple pushes out. However, if they do push out Beta 4, expect maybe a release candidate the following week and then the final release in the second week of July. However, I think at this point we'll see it probably next week. I'd be surprised if they push it out a few weeks since it seems to be mostly done. iOS 15 Beta 2 was released on a Thursday last year, so we can expect a Wednesday, Thursday, or maybe even a Friday, that's very rare, release of iOS 16 Beta 2. That's what we're expecting. I would expect something similar this time around. Now, when it comes to iPhone 14, we're expecting that hole punch display with sort of a little pill design, and Apple is apparently going over the new 6.1-inch OLEDs being produced by BOE this week. BOE got in a bit of trouble for changing some of their overall specs on the displays, and Apple sort of put them in review. But apparently Apple's looking at them to manufacture some of the displays for iPhone 14 non-Pro models, and is reviewing that this week, getting ready to ramp up production overall to get them ready for a fall release, usually in September. Apple is also expected to give the iPhone 14 the largest front-facing camera update we've seen in a long time, with a larger 1.9 aperture and a 6-part lens instead of a 5-part lens. So along with a huge update to the back cameras, where we could see a 48-megapixel 8K camera as well. All of those are expected in the Pro models of the iPhone 14. Hopefully the front-facing camera makes it to all of them. Now, speaking of the chipsets inside of the upcoming products from Apple, TSMC, who manufactures them, Taiwan Semiconductor, is working on making 2-nanometer chips to be ready by 2025. Currently, we're at 5 nanometer. Apple's going to get that down to 3 and then even smaller, which means more power efficiency and even more transistors on one chip. So we'll see more and more power, but power efficiency as well. We're expecting all of that within the next few years. Now, in an odd bit of news this past week, we heard from Ming Chi Kuo that Apple is selling quite a few AirTags and may have a second-generation product that they're working on to prepare to ship, if it continues to grow. I'm not sure what you would do with it other than maybe increase battery life and some tracking features, but AirTags have seemingly been very successful, and I use them on many of my products, such as this one is off my backpack where I keep my camera and more, and you'll see it just fits in easily here, and then I don't have to think about it. So it's just a nice way to keep track of things, but an AirTag 2 seems unnecessary, I think, at this point, but I'm curious again what you think about that. Maybe they could make it smaller or something else, but I'm not sure what else you could do with it. Apple is working on a new entry-level iPad with an A14 CPU, USB-C to bring them up to compliance like we talked about before, which would possibly give them a new design, as well as a larger 10.5-inch display up from 10.2, and also 5G. So it would sort of bring them into the era where we had similar designs across everything, got rid of the sort of iPad Air design that we had before, or the legacy design, and brought them into the world of USB-C and more. What you could do to differentiate the traditional iPad to the iPad Air is hard to say at this point, but it looks like we could see that very soon, maybe this year or even next year. Analyst Ross Young has also said that they could be working on a 14.1-inch iPad, which was initially thought to be an iPad Pro, but maybe a normal iPad because it doesn't appear to have ProMotion. Ross Young is a display analyst and is pretty spot on with all of his predictions, but it looks like they're working on a much larger iPad. Personally, I would love to see that. This is a 12.9-inch. I love the giant iPads. Having an even larger one would be great for me, but not necessarily for everyone. Now, also according to display analyst Ross Young, who has a very good track record, we could see a new OLED 13-inch MacBook Air and iPad by 2024. This allows for additional thinness. It would have a 1 Hz to 120 Hz LTPO display, but would also be a shift away from mini LED that we have here. It's possible that Apple is setting this up in case micro LED isn't ready in time, then they could just easily switch to OLED, but it seems odd that they would push mini LED so much and then switch to OLED, as the technologies each have their own benefit, with the LED display being more color accurate over time. Either way, a new iPad Pro model is expected this year with an M2 processor in it and wireless charging, according to Mark Gurman, usually around September or October. We haven't had an update this year with the iPad Pro, so a later release this year makes sense. Now, according to Ming Chi Kuo, or Kuo Ming Chi, Apple is looking to be working on a 15-inch MacBook that would offer an M2 or M2 Pro option. This would be next year in 2023, but seems a bit odd as it would not be a MacBook Pro, but rather a MacBook Air or regular MacBook. That would slot in between the 14 and 16-inch MacBook. Personally, I would like to see Apple do away with the 13-inch, just bring in the MacBook Air, have the MacBook Pro in a couple sizes, and really slim down the overall offerings. However, Mark Gurman said that Apple was considering a new 12-inch MacBook as well, but Ming Chi Kuo has said he's not heard of such a device. So it looks like the overall leaks are getting harder and harder to determine, other than those making displays. Now, Apple is still working on its AR or VR headset, and LG is apparently already getting new displays ready for the second-gen Apple mixed reality headset, which would be micro LED displays according to the elec. So Apple is always about 3 years ahead and sort of sourcing parts, so that makes sense that they'd be working on that now, and we expect maybe by the end of the year we'll see the real first-generation headset. Apple Glass is also still in the works, but planned for a much later 2023 or 2024 release, as it's still sort of in the design phase and Apple's getting that ready. So lots of different things Apple is always working on. Of course, next generation iPhones, Apple Watches, and more. So that's everything with this week's updates. Of course, I'm looking forward to iOS 16 Beta 2 the most, where we expect some major changes, maybe some additional features, or just some enhancements that we didn't see before and additional stability. Let me know what you're looking most forward to in the comments below. And of course, if you'd like to get your hands on this wallpaper, I'll link it in the description like I normally do. If you haven't subscribed already though, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.